So Jana, Tom, thank you for being here today, and thanks also for your participation in the study. Jana is Global CIO at Mohawk Industries, which is one of the leading flooring manufacturers in the US and is also a global business. In fact, we may be sitting on Mohawk floors.
That's correct.
Right now, chances are. Thank you so much for being here. And Tom Mildenhall. Tom is SVP of Technology Business Development at Bank of America. And wanted to get your reactions to a number of the findings in the study that we had today, and also have you share your different success strategies as it relates to startup engagement, because both of your organizations have very different approaches to startup engagement, but are equally active in terms of participating in that ecosystem. And the one question I wanted to start out with was, and maybe John, I'll start with you, and then would love your thoughts, Tom. What value do you think there is for CIOs and IT leaders to actually benchmark their innovation practices and their startup engagement practices? And are there certain metrics or areas of benchmarking that you would like to do?
Oh, okay, that's a great question, Shruti. Thanks for the opportunity. Appreciate it. In Mohawk, what we look at it is we look at innovation in its purest form in terms of, I don't necessarily equate startup with innovation. Most of the startups drive innovations, but not all innovations are driven by startups, right? I think you made the point. So we constantly look at how do we bring in more ideas in everything that we do, whether it is a back-end processes or internal process or customer-facing process. How do we continuously innovate in terms of the product that we offer to market, or how we operate as a company? And we used to have a methodology called 5x5, where you get 5 weeks and $5,000 that now we have increased to 5x50, $50,000, 5 weeks, to come up with an idea that fail fast or succeed fast, and then move into the things. Therefore, a lot of the findings that you are now shared in the benchmark validates the approach that we've been doing in the last 7 or 8 years. Therefore, that is the value I look at it to say internally we continuously measure. I don't have a target number, but we look at how do we continuously improve year over year, right? If we did 20 innovations, things that we brought into production last year, how do we now make it to 25, to 50, right? How do we continuously push ourselves into, but I don't necessarily put, okay, here's a 10% of my budget is for innovation ideas. We don't constrain it, because one of the good things about a company is very innovative, very nimble. There is no literally budget. We start with the budget that gets thrown out January 1st. Therefore, it's become a forecast. And therefore, if we start with $10, I can easily, 10 million, I can move it to 50 million if there are 5 more ideas that are really good, that is going to have value.
And Tom, obviously, Bank of America Technology BD team, which you globally lead, has a pretty mature approach as well. How do you think about the value of benchmarking some of these and tracking some of these metrics?
Well, thanks for having us, Shruti. It's great to be here. I think, one of the ways, it's important, I think, for a few reasons. One is, if you don't have a way to measure how you're working with startups, you can easily waste a lot of time internally and the startup's time, because you don't have a good reason why you're interacting with them. And for us, my team doesn't get involved where we're deciding to build something ourselves. And if you build everything yourselves, then you don't need startups. But if you don't, which a lot of companies are deciding to buy more and build less, or a hybrid approach, then you need to know where you're going to do that, and you need to know clearly what you're trying to achieve, and then you can find startups that can help you do that. And then I think if you have those goals in mind, then you'll know if you accomplish them. And I think the other reason why it matters is because there's a lot of companies usually in any given space, and you need to know what are the good and bad, like what are the best ones. You need to be able to measure that and understand that. And then I think in the market right now, Bank of America is trying to reduce expenses, but at the same time, you have to create a better customer experience and do things faster than ever. So you need to. All this stuff matters because of those things.
So I wanted to touch on organizational strategies briefly, because one of the findings in the Innovation Index study was that 70% of the IT executives in the study indicated that they have a dedicated lead or leads for startup engagement within the enterprise. And Tom, maybe I'll start with you, because you also have a unique place within the Bank of America organization, and you're connected directly into the CIO's organization. Yep. If you wouldn't mind sharing the organizational structure and strategy that you believe works for Bank of America. And I know, Jana, at Mohawk, it's a different approach, but would love to have you share that.
Yeah. So we've done this for about 12 years, and just for scale, we have 90,000 people in tech and ops and like mid-teens billions a year as a budget. And we have 2 CIOs, a CTO, a CISO, a chief data officer. They're all my boss. And then all the business
Fun for you.
And then all the business leaders as well are my boss. So it kind of just goes on and on. And so we've done this for 12 years, and it's really refined itself over the years to be, I think, a pretty well-oiled machine. And where it starts in the way my team's organized, we're only 12 in the US and 1 person in Europe, is we each cover parts of the bank. So we have, IT, and we have like infrastructure and security that are very core IT, and then we have app dev in the CIO groups, and those are facing off to businesses. And then we have internal functions like HR and legal, and those also have dev groups that face off to them. So I have people on my team that spend time with each of those groups. So internally, we're probably spending time with several hundred people at all levels of the organization to understand priorities and challenges and focus areas. Basically, where can we help accelerate their goals? So their goals are our goals. And so that could be in HR, it can be, like I said, cybersecurity, it could be fraud tech, could be AML tech, anything you can think of we could buy, that's what we spend time on. So organizationally, we have people that cover all those areas. And then externally, that's what we do as well. So externally with VCs and startups, my team will spend time with those same types of investors and companies. So in a year, we probably meet about 500 companies, do 200 or 300 VC meetings, and we do a lot of filtering to understand. So we've been doing it for 12 years, so we have a lot of filters we put in place. From there, the way we organize it is we would meet a company and do a bunch of kind of filtering on the quality, the stage, customers, a bunch of things we'll ask them. And if we think there's something there with one of the internal groups, we'll make that introduction, and then it could go to a POC and become a vendor. And none of this is, it doesn't happen quickly. So it might be a company we met 4 years ago that we decide to do something with today. It's not usually we meet a company and then we do something with them immediately. We're not ready, they're not ready, and we have to be really honest about that, and we view the whole thing as relationships. So the important thing is in those 4 years, we maintain a good relationship, don't waste time on our side or the startup side. We can crush a startup. And so, that's how we structure it to be comprehensive across the whole firm. We really cover every nook and cranny. And then we try to be a resource across the org on like myth busting as well. So AI, blockchain, fintech, all these things. We try to help do myth busting on those type of topics. But that's sort of a little bit about how we organize the group.
Awesome word, myth busting. I'm going to use it.
There's a lot to do.
And Jana?
One of the things I want to take the opportunity, Sapphire Ventures, you guys provide a biggest help for me, the value and the things, because you already vet a lot of the startups for companies like Mohawk. Therefore, I really appreciate the value that you bring in the partnership. I want to take this opportunity to mention that that is critical. And the way I have organized in Mohawk globally is we have 5 lines of business CIOs, and then we have 4 centers of excellence. Therefore, the innovation responsibility is carried by all 9 of them. And it creates tension, which is intentional. I do want them to argue about things and passionately discuss things, the pros and cons. But most of the ideas are driven by the centers of excellence, because that is what they're constantly looking at, right? In addition to deploying the projects, what other new ideas can we bring in to do things faster or differently? And then the CIOs decide the priorities in which how those ideas can be executed in the business units and how the change can be managed. That's how we operate.
I wanted to cover the topic of proofs of concept, which I think both of your organizations do a fair bit, specifically with startups. And especially since we have not only CIOs, but also startup leaders and startup CEOs in the room. In your experience for each of your organizations, what do you think are some of the success drivers of a successful POC? And if you have any advice, not only for the CIOs of how to maybe sort of guide their organization to follow a certain kind of POC process, but also any advice, frankly, for the startups that are on the supply side of the equation of common mistakes they make that make POCs not go so well, and what are sort of some of the the success drivers there?
Oh, that's a good one. So we are really, Bank of America is really hard to do business with as a startup, right? I mean, it is, and that's our team's job. You know, we're like the Sherpa for the startup. I've helped the bank do business with pre-Series A startups, like we are their very first enterprise customer. And the key thing for all of that is there's an actual need. Like the business needs something and they're solving a problem. And if that company solves it better than anyone else, they'll buy it. It doesn't matter if it's 12 people, which that company was, or 200,000 people. So on the POC front, I think as a startup founder, I wouldn't do a free POC ever. I would highly qualify, if I was a startup founder, the POC, and if it's successful, then what happens next? That would be really important. I would want to know a lot about the architecture and integration of like other applications involved, so that you were aware was the POC the like reality when you actually maybe went into production. And I think on the corporate side, I think we see things where you can imagine we need a company and we're getting to know them and it's been a couple months and then it goes on. And it could be a year or 18 months for us before we do a POC. And when we actually do technical testing, and for it to be that point where we find out, oh, this doesn't work or it doesn't work how we want it, here's some feedback, go fix it, is sort of ridiculous. It's a waste of time for everyone. So I think, and we don't do this, so I'm not saying that we do it, but anything you can do to speed up that process and make it faster, then you can test more companies, fail quicker, give feedback, fix it, and go on. And I think that's better for everybody. I think it's just, in our industry with all the regulation, it's harder and for a lot of other reasons, but I think that's the best way to approach it and have faster POCs. And I wouldn't do them for free.
I'm just curious, for the startups in the room, show of hands, how many of you charge for POCs? All right.
Yeah, if someone doesn't want to pay you, don't do it.
Don't know if Jana agrees with that, but would.
Exactly. I don't know exactly. I have a different point of view. It's not about the free or the. It's not.
Did the startup slip you a 20 before you came onto the stage?
Exactly.
No, I mean I've just done it like 2,000 times. So if you're not going to pay for it, it's not important. So
that's one way to measure it. The other way is we look at it as it's not about the dollars, right? At the end of the day, the company, well, it's going to be a win-win relationship, right? Your vendor or your partner needs to make the money and they need to succeed, and you're going to be not only you're going to be successful in implementing, but you become a spokesperson for them. You're helping them grow even faster when you have a successful story. Therefore, we focus more on not necessarily how much to charge. At the end of the day, free is a scale, right? It's 0 to whatever the amount is, right? There is still a contract in terms of what we want to get things done, and how are we going to roll out, what success looks like, and how quickly we get to the point of making a decision on success or failure, right? That is why I highlighted this 5 weeks thing, right? 5 or 6 weeks, we constantly look at to say, how do we kill? Because most of the time where the value is not created is we just let this thing drag on, and nobody knows when to kill or when to call it success. That is why for me, time bound is more important than financial a dollar value. We could argue about $1 as 0, right? But time bounding and then having an outcome. But successful, the important conversation I spend a lot of time on is what are we going to do when we're successful? Okay, not only within Mohawk but with others, because that is where the win-win partnership comes in. How can I help the startups to go sell more things? Which customers do they want to go? What do they want me to do to help convince other doubtful players or people who want to learn from what we went through, so that their time is even shorter than what we did.
Yeah, I think if you're a startup, I think that's what you're missing, Jana. Like you want to have really clear expectations of what the POC entails, the length, and make sure that that's all very clear ahead of time, and what are the success criteria. And again, like if it's successful, what happens next? Yeah. And I would qualify constantly about that and budget and all that stuff, like every single week.
I think we have time for a question.
For the early stage POCs that you guys do, can you speak about not so much story inventing, but how do you handle the information security part of it? So, sorry, I know. How do you handle, because obviously they're early stage, so they're not going and getting and they're technology companies, so they're not getting SSAE, SOC 2 Type 1. They don't have any of that. So how do you handle the security of your data in these early stage companies that don't quite have those controls in place?
We would wait till they did. I mean, we don't circumvent anything for any POCs. So they go through all the exact same stuff. For a POC, we can get into it and look at a couple different things. Like we have environments we can do now and this is another thing you can do, I think, as a company. We've stood up an environment that's a controlled environment. It's on-prem still, not like on a public cloud, which could actually be a good way to do it, but where you control access and data, and so you can test them in there, but they can't leave those. They can't leave that environment, and that's one way to do that. But in general, for most of the companies we deal with, they have to go through everything. I mean, it's background checks, and it's a pretty extensive list, and that's why it takes a long time, and that's why I wouldn't do it for free. So yeah, that's what we do. And yeah, the procurement process and that whole thing, the contract, is a whole separate long discussion.
Don't do any free things for the banks.
Don't.
In Mohawk, we don't have any proprietary data. I can give you, by the way, I'm going to throw out some numbers for you just to make it interesting. How many of you know that most of the carpet these days that are most stain resistance are made from 100% recycled plastic bottles? 100%. None of them goes to waste. Do you guys know how many bottles Mohawk recycled last year? Anybody take a guess? Millions? 100 million? 1 billion? Any guess? 7.5 billion water bottles. 40%, 45%, actually close to, of all the water bottles thrown out in the world, we recycle them 100%. Okay? It goes into carpet that is the softest and most stain-resistant carpet. Okay? Now, the reason I give that number is I can give the recipe. I can put it on the internet for everybody to say. Probably Google has it. Nobody can do anything with it. By the time they had to install the equipment and the things, we built that equipment. We have the patent on them 5 years. Therefore, we openly talk about it. We partnered with a startup for our data analytics platform, right? TidalScale, you guys will see it outside. Okay, for a simple thing, I always call them their anti-VMware. VMware takes a big server, breaks it up into smaller virtual machines. TidalScale works the opposite. It's software-defined server that takes smaller, commodity servers, make it look like a giant super thing for the software, right? And you can scale up. That thing, we proved it within 2.5 months in terms of an improved 25% more performance. And I think Shruti was saying it. It's always, I think, it's a collaboration between startup and the established vendor. When I shared this result with Dell, initially their reaction was, oh my God, no, we cannot, Jana, we don't want you to do Mohawk. You guys need to stay in this big, giant, server block that we sold you. We want to renew it. We'll give it to you for free as long as you say no to TidalScale. I said, that is not a good answer. I want them to partner with TidalScale so that I can put them the V block in the same structure that is protected, that I can scale it up, but still I want to reduce the cost of the environment. That is the type of things we constantly look at, right? A POC, I work on more than putting the handcuffs, instead open it up, come up with new ways to solve, use that opportunity to even challenge some of the shackle put on ourselves.
Thank you, and I think that is a wrap. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks.
Okay.